Welcome to a Play Talk Sessions. Today we have a very special person and we will be talking about risky play. On board we have Dr. Mariana Brussoni, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right because I know Mariana is from Uruguay, so I'm not adding any English accent into your name. Welcome, Mariana. I am beyond thrilled to have you here with us. Mariana is a professor at the University of British Columbia, director of the Human Early Learning Partnership HELP, and founding member of Outdoor Play Canada. She's done an amazing work doing research for risky play mainly, and focusing on the benefits that it provides children, and basically fostering healthy habits through movement and outdoor and risky play. So welcome, Mariana.
It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having the same name.
I mean, what are the chances? It's the first time.
Great.
And you're from Uruguay, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So did you live there, or?
Yes, I lived there, and I moved to Canada when I was a child with my family. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So it was so funny because when I first contacted Mariana, she responded a little bit in Spanish, and then I thought, I mean, what are the chances? So I'm so happy to have you on board. I've been digging into all the research you've done, and first of all, I want to congratulate you for your amazing work, hard work, because especially nowadays, we need to rethink education. That's what I do, fostering play, advocating for play, for childhood, for healthy childhood. And the amount of work and effort that you put into risky play it's just beyond words. You've done a great effort, and you've put together an amazing platform with all these research to be easy to access for all of us. So let's get started, Mariana. Let's talk about risky play. This topic that, I mean, it's kind of becoming like people are more aware about talking about risky play, but what is risky play, and why should we actually talk about risky play? Because we grew up being risky. Our childhood was filled with risk. And why are we talking now about risky play?
Yeah, it's a great question. Why do we even need to label it as risky play? Why can't it just be play? And it's really important because there's some big changes that have happened over time. So maybe I'll start with what is risky play. And I think that the easiest way for a lot of people to think about this is, if you think back to your favorite childhood play memory, and we've asked people around the world this question, and almost everyone is outdoors. And almost everyone, when you dig into those memories, is taking risks. And so, they talk about things like, climbing trees or pushing their bodies really far, maybe going really fast down ramps, or doing some rough and tumble play with their friends, or building dens or other sorts of structures together. Those kinds of things are what we talk about when we talk about risky play. And we really are focusing not so much on, say, me as an adult looking at something and thinking that's risky play or not. It's what's happening for the child for themselves. And so the definition of risky play is thrilling and exciting forms of play where kids are engaged with uncertainty and there's a chance of physical injury. And so if we break down kind of the elements of that definition, you've got the thrill and excitement. So you've got kids that are just pushing themselves past where they've done. Maybe they're climbing higher, maybe they're jumping farther, and they're engaged with uncertainty. They don't know what's going to happen. Could be good, could be bad. And there's a chance of physical injury. They're moving their bodies, and they're sometimes engaging in very risky activities. And this is part of what my research program has done, is actually dig into what is the likelihood of injury? How much do we need to worry about that? And we can talk about that later.
Yeah, so, I read a little bit of that when I was impressed because I would have never imagined. But let's leave that for later.
Yeah, it's people are surprised. And so, why are we talking about risky play now? Because it's disappearing from children's lives. And so we point really to the 80s, the 1980s, at a time when this started to happen. And what you saw in that time is kind of, well, there was a lot of factors, but one of the factors that was happening is that parenting norms were changing. You had parents engaging in much more kind of intensive parenting, being more involved in their children's lives. And the norm that a good parent is one who's making sure that their child is in different activities and developing their brain and supervised. And so we saw a move towards kind of, you can call it in some ways overprotective parenting, a sense that kids weren't safe outdoors and that they needed for their own good to be protected and supervised, and so much more restrictive freedom since that time. And now, not to put, like, it's not just parenting. There was a variety of factors that happened in society that all contributed to it, including urbanization and the move towards cars and so on and so forth. But it's meant that we've lost the what some people call a play-based childhood, and specifically, especially a risky play-based childhood. And so researchers like me come along and we're like, oh, what's going on? We need to study and measure it, and hence we come up with a term, risky play. We define it and we start measuring what happens when kids don't have these kinds of experiences.
I'm going to share a funny story. Well, not necessarily funny. This is the first time I'm actually sharing this. I grew up in a farm. I'm the youngest of four. And my siblings, they're 10, 8, and 5 years older than I am. And I grew up outside every day of my life. But I was not a risky play child. I am extremely organized to the date. I measured every single thing that I did. I was meticulous. I did not enjoy taking risk. And I played with my cousins who loved taking risk. The biggest risk I think I took was jumping off a closet, trying to attempt to climb a tree, and perhaps swim in the river that was close to our home. But I did not have that in me. Like, it did not bring me joy because I was overthinking. But now, as an adult, as I look back, I also had a mom who was not overprotecting, but was afraid of many things. Roller coasters, or be careful, watch out, you're going to fall, you're going to hurt yourself. So she was constantly giving me that. And I was probably super sensitive, and I was feeding off that. And I did not like taking risks. As an adult, I've had no choice but to take risks. And it always feels uncomfortable. When I became a mom, that's another bridge that you have to unblock, because if you did not grow up under that risky umbrella, but you know that you should not overprotect your children, and risky play is part of a healthy development. Opening that door to my children has been very hard because I have to go against what I feel, and I think that that's a very, very hard thing to do, especially in today's world. So I wanted to share that with you because I see it from both angles, and I think that it's powerful. And when I was growing up, I would see my cousin go up the tree, and all I could think was, I wish I could be him, but I could not do it. So I think that this is a way to relate with many of the people who are going to be listening, because a lot of us grew up the same way. Maybe there were a lot of risk takers, but what I do see nowadays, which is what I advocate for and I'm so worried about, is that there's no risk whatsoever. Parents are overprotecting over things that should not be overprotecting, because risky play does not equal lack of boundaries, or does not equal lack of supervision. Our job as parents is to make sure that they're in a safe environment overall, where you will know, like, they'll be fine. They will figure it out. And if they overcome danger or some sort of difficulty, they will be encouraged to make a decision, because that's what we want over risky play and this sort of uh, learning experiences. We want children to be able to decide without us telling them what to do. I think that people have these misconceptions, and we talk a little bit about that, on how it's not about just letting them loose and figuring it out. There's boundaries. There are parameters that we take into consideration.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that, but I actually want to touch on a couple of things that you mentioned, around your background and your childhood. So one of the things that's critical about risky play is that it looks different for different kids, right? And so it's not that every kid has to be that kid that's just, climbing to the top of the tree and so on. And so it very much, like, the thrill and excitement is an internal thing. And so for some kids, it can be, I'm going to make it to the first branch, and that's enough. And in fact, one of the types of risky play is vicarious risky play, where you're watching other people engage and you're experiencing the thrill and excitement yourself. So I guess I would argue that you did take risks. And while I focus on physical risks, there's also cognitive, emotional risks, and risks in school, and risks when you fall in love, and all of those kinds of things, that we need to think about. And frankly, anybody who learned to walk took risks, right? If you think about how, the tottering that kids do as they're learning to walk, it's risky. So I would argue that there was actually a lot of risk in your life. The other element that I wanted to touch on is, you mentioned your mom having kind of these anxious and fearful attitudes, and that's, it's hard as a parent, really hard. But that's one of the things that we've noticed, is that it happens to a lot of parents, is these anxious and fearful attitudes, and the be careful and watch out, that influences the kids. And so when the kids hear that, like you mentioned, they internalize, the world is very dangerous. I have to be super careful. But what they also hear is, I'm not trustworthy to take care of myself. I need someone else to tell me what's going on. And, if I'm being kind of overseen like this, then I'm not capable of doing this for myself. And then they also don't have experiences, opportunities to test it out, because they're always, kind of monitored by an adult, and to build that kind of sense of themselves as, like, capable and competent.
Mhm.
So just, and then getting back to your main question, which is, so how do adults kind of manage this? So one thing that some people find helpful is to think about the distinction between a risk and a hazard, right?
Mhm.
And so what we're aiming for is we're trying to keep kids as safe as necessary, not as safe as possible. We're not trying to prevent every injury. What we're trying to do is create, an environment that's enriching and full of possibility, where we have thought about the really serious hazards. Like, and when I'm talking serious, I'm talking those that would cause very serious injury or death, that kids might not be able to identify for themselves. And, we can talk about the injury statistics, but it's actually very unlikely that kids do get, seriously injured and or die engaging these kinds of activities. And so, as you say, it's thinking about, how can you provide an environment where kids can really explore, where, you can let them go and roam, where we retain the risk, but we manage the hazard.
And it's so powerful, because um, going back to my childhood, I did have the opportunity to embrace and engage into all sort of risk out there. There was no supervision. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. It was very different as it is today. And we also have to embrace that. We have a different type of parenthood going on nowadays, which is not bad. Things
It's
have
different.
changed. Life has evolved. The needs are different. But there, I had the opportunity, and our job as parents and as educators as well, because I want this to happen also in learning environments. Our job is to foster and to promote spaces that will actually make children want to engage into play overall. The risk will come along with this play. And moving forward to our conversation, we engage into outer play, exploration, movement. How much are children moving? How much are schools adding movement into their days aside from PE and a 10-minute recess? How much are children playing at home? How much are children riding their bicycles, scooters? I mean, if you go outside, it's less and less and less over time. I don't know where it was a couple of months ago that I read. I believe it was North Carolina had a power outage, and all children came out of their homes. And there was these big, the news were out there saying it took a power outage for children to go back outside. And that is sad because screens are taking over all these vital experiences of play and outdoor play that children need to grow healthy and grow up feeling like they're worth it. They're just spending hours watching TV, or watching TV is the least thing they do. Playing video games on their smartphones, and not only children, teenagers as well. Can you talk a little bit about and I know that this is not your model, but you use it a lot, about the different types of risky play?
Yeah, so there's 8 types that have been identified. So play at speed. So, for example, riding your bike really fast down a hill. Play at heights, like climbing a tree. Rough and tumble play, like play fighting. Play where there's a chance of getting lost. So that's like kids being, say, unsupervised, able to go out in their neighborhoods with friends or on their own. When you're talking about really young kids, maybe there's hidey holes in the play space or things like that. Play with dangerous tools, for example, when they're hammering or sawing to build something. Play near dangerous elements, which is like, for example, near fire or water or cliffs. And there's 2 kind of new ones that came on later on. One is play with impact. So, for example, just kind of ramming into things or hitting things to feel the impact, as well as vicarious play, which is the other one I mentioned, which is particularly prevalent in really like younger kids, and as they're kind of learning, watching older kids engage in risky play and getting that thrill from it.
Do you have any data? And I'm just throwing you under the bus here because I'm wondering 2 things. Do you have any data on why this risky play is in decline? Because we know the reasons, but is there like a certain number of? Is it technology? Is it working parents? What is changing that it's really
Yeah.
impacting the decline?
It's a lot of things that all happen. So I mentioned kind of the late 80s where we were starting to see shifts. And so as I mentioned, one of it was parenting and the change in parenting approach. But it's important to understand, why did that change happen in parenting approach? And what you saw is, in the post-war era, you had basically the least amount of inequality in society yet, right? So you have people, for example, who with a high school education, who could have a very decent life, and afford a house and the kinds of things that they needed and so on. And starting in the 70s, there was a series of recessions that increased inequities, and it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And so around the 80s is when parents were kind of waking up to the fact that their children had to work harder, get more education to be able to attain, let's say, a similar lifestyle. And that's gotten worse to the point now where parents are even like, is my child even ever going to have a lifestyle like mine? And so it was kind of this push towards kids, we need to make sure that kids are achieving getting into the right schools and, and so on. And so that intensive parenting model became the norm around curating their children's childhood to make sure that they, got into the right schools and places. And at the same time, you had so the prevalence of, for example, certainly when I grew up, there was, like at the back of milk cartons, you would see the picture of kids who had been abducted and things like that. So, and as media became more available, and certainly, as we have smartphones in our hands all the time, there is also the perception that that kidnapping is a big issue, that kids are very unsafe, that the world is getting more and more dangerous, which in fact it doesn't reflect statistics. And so there was a sense that kids shouldn't be left out, that part of being a good parent is making sure that your kids are supervised and under some adult's control at all times. And then you have things like the change of neighborhoods and their design. You have greater urbanization. And what that means too is that people are less likely to know their neighbors. So the sense of social capital decreases. So they don't feel like there's eyes on the street if I let my kid out, if something happens, there's somebody who can take care of them. And then there's this shift from like other people as potentially helpful to seeing other people as harmful, right? And then you have, a move towards a car-based culture. And so an erosion of spaces for kids to play and kind of giving over the cities and neighborhoods to cars rather than people and children, and various other factors. Those are just some of the ones that we know about.
Yeah, and we get into this fast speed life, and it's hard to stop and hard to pause and see and allow children to be children. We see children overscheduled Monday through Sunday, because even with the soccer thing and all those sports, it's crazy. Children have no time for free play to figure out. Not they don't have a chance to even get bored and face boredom, because when did you climb that tree? When did you? I remember we would dig a hole to get to China. When did we go jump in the river? When we were bored and we wanted to figure it out and we wanted to explore. This window of exploration and discovery is getting shorter and shorter and shorter over time. And I think that we need to speak up, and that we need to teach educators and parents in the digital era the importance of play and how to protect it. I am convinced, Mariana, that a couple of years from now, people will start moving back, because they will see the impact of technology in these generations that are being harmed. Speaking of which, Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Anxious Generation and referred to your work in his book, he talks about how screens are taking over risky play. Do you want to share something in regards of technology?
Sure. Yeah. And as I mentioned, I mean, this is a trajectory that was happening before screens, but certainly it's very much been accelerated, and negative impact of screens. And so when we look at kind of time use diaries and how do kids spend their time, we've seen a dramatic decrease in outdoor play and in socialization in real life. And what's getting lost is, that's going online, right?
Mm-hmm.
We also see a huge decline in sleep. And so those things are being taken over by screen time. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is really an area of concern, because children's mental health it's on the line here, and we're talking about obesity, and we're talking about lack of movement, we're lacking social skills, we're lacking life. Children are just being robbed of their childhoods with with and I'm not against technology. I think that you teach how to use technology over time. You teach children about the importance of playing. You teach children about the importance of fresh air and how you need to spend time outside. You can go to a park. You set aside time to get yourself surrounded by nature somehow. You have a lot of research in the field, and I want you to share a little bit about the toolkit that you have on your website. I'm going to add the website here, but you've done well, you and your team, because I know that this takes a village. Can you share about the toolkit? Because I think Mariana and I'm committed to continue to help you and to um, share all the information that you publish and that you continue to create, because this is right there, it's free, and it's so important for future educators, for educators, and for parents to get educated within the area.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's important for people to know, and these are free tools anybody can access. So I think what it's helpful for people to know is that there's three key ingredients to kind of outdoor risky play: time, space, and freedom. And
Mhm.
so we tackle how do you get those three key ingredients in children's lives. And if you're talking also about play that occurs in neighborhoods, the fourth key ingredient is other children, right?
Mhm.
So what we've developed these tools because this is a complex issue, as we've been talking about, to try and um, tackle the different barriers to this. And so, with respect to time, it's as you said, it's understanding that this is just as important every day as eating or sleeping. That it needs to be a part of every child's life every day. And the space is having access to spaces, high quality spaces that are interesting for kids and that provide affordances for challenge and so on. Freedom is that when those kids are able to have the time and the space, that they're actually able to play in the ways that they choose, that there's not a kind of an adult hovering over, controlling or stopping them from playing. And so a really big aspect of all that. So we do work on design and how do you design play spaces and so on. But a really big aspect that we need to tackle is adult attitudes. So they're understanding that this is important and they're what we call reframing their sense of risk, right? And so because what we see is that adults in is some of the biggest limitations result from their own fears. So they're making decisions, and we call it kind of anxiety based caregiving. They're making decisions about what kids should be allowed to do in a way that they're managing their own fears. It's like that. Be careful, watch out, don't do that, rather than, kind of taking a moment to calm that initial, quick fear response and really see, what's the big deal? Do I need to worry about this? Do I need to step in and so on? And so we have three tools on our website to help with that. The first is a parent tool. So it's a tool that parents, it takes them through some self-reflective questions around, we want to ground this in parents' values, right? So parents are really used to, and I'm a parent myself, they're really used to being told all of the things that they're doing wrong as a parent
Mhm.
and all of the things that they should be doing as a parent. And it's hard to kind of block out that chatter. And we don't want to be part of that. So we want parents to really think about what's important to them. When they're the values that they want to pass on to their kids and the values that they want to entrench in their children. So we start with that. What do you most value? What's most important to you? And frankly, almost everything is addressed by risky play.
Mhm.
So, we want them to ground themselves in the values, and then we ask them some questions around, hey, what did you do when you were a kid? What's your child doing? Why is there a difference? What are some of the things that are you're afraid of? What are some of the things that help you let go? And so through that, we help them create a plan for change. And we really encourage like underwhelming change. Start small, simple, easy, so that you're not kind of overwhelmed by, I want my child to do this, like walk to school on their own. Well, that's a big thing. You need to kind of build up to that. The second tool is for early childhood educators, so in childcare environments. So we did a lot of work talking to them around what are some of the challenges and barriers that they face. And so it's the same, it takes them through different steps and interactive videos to come up with a plan for how they want to make a change. And the third tool is for teachers. And so this is focused on PhD work by a student of mine, Megan Zenny, who is a teacher. And so she worked with teachers across the country who take their learning outdoors to be able to, what do I wish I'd known when I was starting out? What are some of the simple things that I can do? So it's like, she calls it like a digital colleague, hearing from other teachers on how to do this work in schools.
Yeah, and you have a podcast that Megan is hosting, right? Because I saw it. I have not listened to the episodes, but I'm looking forward to it. I already added it to my list. Let me see if I can find the link to pull it into the chat. But
Well,
I think that's amazing.
The tool, yeah. So there's 16 little modules in the tool, and they cover things like risky play, but also dealing with urban hazards, teaching numeracy and literacy outdoors, etc. Each one has a short little 90-second, 2-minute video, and then you have the longer 30-minute to an hour conversation with a very skilled educator who's doing this work.
I absolutely love the idea. Well, I homeschool, Mariana. I homeschool 14 children. You don't know this part of my story, but I have over 20 years of experience in education. I swore to life that I was never going to go back to the classroom. Then I had my children, and then I could not send my daughter to the traditional school system, and ended up homeschooling, hence having a tiny school in my garage. And I homeschool 14 mixed age group, and I have 2 other toddlers, and who are mine, and I teach in the afternoon. But we have this beautiful garage that's set up as a tiny school, and I have a small patio and backyard in which I have 0 toys. And these children have spent the most precious years playing outside, figuring it out. My first feeling of, and this will take us to our next topic, was when I was doing the garage and putting it all together, was I'm going to get a swing set. And then I thought, it's going to kill all the freedom of this green space. I want children to figure it out. And they've come along with games. We have a mud kitchen. We do have a mud kitchen. I mean, so that's the best thing. I think if you ask me, that's the best toy now that we're having coming up with holidays. If you want to give your children something, give them a mud kitchen. But the message here is you don't need to have this humongous outdoor space to make outdoor play possible. It could be a tiny space, and it's worth it. And if you don't have any outdoor space, there are public parks, there are places you can go and find these beautiful experiences. I am big on open-ended play, and I think that open-ended play outdoors, it's even more powerful because it makes children put into practice all their 21st century skills of creativity, innovation, problem solving, and you add this risk into the equation, and it's just absolutely beautiful. I think that risky play is something that we should advocate for, and play overall. You said it so beautifully at the beginning. It's children being children. We have to allow children to behave like children. We need to be and shift our worries over play towards the worries over devices and unsupervised devices and social media. That's where we should be stressing all these protection, because that's where that world is dangerous. Our backyard or the park might include dangers, but dangers that children can handle. Devices embrace a huge amount of opportunities for danger without us being able to control. I want to talk now that I hear about um, my play space in the back patio. Can you just tell us a little bit about play spaces
Mm,
out? What are your recommendations for
mm.
these beautiful experiences to happen?
Well, and I think you illustrated it really well. You don't need massive places. You don't need expensive equipment. We use the idea of affordances, right? So you want to make sure that the affordances are vast and maximized. And so the way you do that is to bring in stuff that kids can shape their imagination with. So when you think about kind of playground equipment that's fixed in place, it doesn't move. And so they can't, there's only so much you can do with it, and they get bored of it quickly. Um, if you bring in loose parts, things like rocks, stones, mud, tarps, boxes, the mud kitchen, as you say, those where kids can move them around and allow their imagination to shape the play, it's incredible what can happen. And so it's really quite simple, and it's not expensive,
Mhm.
and it's just kind of giving kids, as I said, the time, the space, and the freedom, and they'll figure it out for themselves.
I totally agree. And I always like to say the best loose parts are in nature and are 100% free. And if you give children dirt, water, sand, and nature overall, that's the biggest chest of loose parts. And children will be entertained for hours. If we have control over screens, because screens will always take over play as long as we don't have boundaries around them.
Well, and what I want to, what I don't want to give the impression is that we're trying to go back to some idealized time in the past, right? So that time is over, and it's not about this kind of wish we were back then. We have a different reality now, and screens are part of our lives. But as you say, it's like, how do you create boundaries around that so that play outdoors every day is still a huge part of kids' lives? Yeah, exactly.
Because it's about boundaries and having um, a good balance and having children also understand the importance. I think that the moment that you inform children, you have informed uh, decision makers because they know how to protect their brains overall and how important it is um, to actually play and play every day of their lives.
Well, and I think just to build on that, one of the important things, like, so we think that we're keeping kids safe by not allowing them to take risks, but it's actually the opposite,
Mhm.
because they're not learning how to deal with danger and hazards, and to figure out for themselves, the executive functioning and creative thinking around how to get themselves, out of sticky situations, or to manage the risk in a particular situation. That stuff doesn't just come online when they turn 18.
Mhm.
That's and there's no way to teach it in a book. You have to embody it. You have to experience it on a regular basis, and you have to build your skills in that area. And so letting kids take risks means keeping them safe because they can build these skills.
I totally agree. And at the end of the day, we're educating and we're educating for life. And in today's world, all these skills need to be taught and
Hmm.
they should be part of the curriculum. And play should be part of the curriculum. And outdoor time and free time should be part of the curriculum. And education around devices should be part of the curriculum. I think we're facing a massive change in education. I like to say that play is the way to rethink education, going back to basics, foundations, adapting them to today's world. Rethinking curriculum, rethinking standards is important because the life that we're facing today is not the life that we faced 5 years ago. I mean, let's talk about AI. We have all these world now, and where are we standing? How can we foster and promote all these skills that no AI or future technology will ever take over? And one of these is play.
Hmm. Yeah, and all the creative thinking and executive functioning that it fosters. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mariana. I will be sharing your website. I already shared it here, your website and your work. I will be sending out an email with your information and with your resources. And I know that people can reach out to, I'm going to share your Instagram here. I know that it's not 100% managed by yourself, but your team is wonderful and they do a great job. And they have amazing content, amazing events, resources, and they share all the information that you can see on their website through Instagram. This is an initiative that needs to be shared with the world, as I like to say, because it benefits all children all over the world in every single inch of our planet. I think it's important. I think play deserves to be out there in every single child's life. I'm going to also copy this um, link, Instagram link to the chat so people can add it. And once this Play Talk goes into the podcast, it will all these links will be added as the episode's notes. So thank you so much for your time. I hope that your work continues to shine and to be delivered to many other experts and parents all over the world.
And thank you, Mariana, for having me. It's been a really delightful conversation. Appreciate it.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you so much.